Hello ladies and germs, how's it going? I'm 6Speed Dakota, and today's project in my new garage, as you can see our setting here has changed a little different for those of you who have been following me quite a bit. We're changing the oil on my wife's 2005 Pontiac Sunfire. Unfortunately, her little green Mazda, which has been featured I think in one or two videos, I don't quite remember. It may come back. I've got a lot of old footage that I need to edit and throw together. But either way, the transmission was starting to go in it, so we decided to replace it with something a little newer, something a little nicer, and this thing hardly has any miles on it. So it's actually, it's only got about 86,000 original kilometers on it. Little old lady driven to church and back its whole life. I've fixed the gauge cluster in it and done a transmission service, and I first changed the engine oil the day we bought it, and this will be its second oil change. I think 4 quarts of 5W30. So we're going to have a little bit left over, but that's okay because I have another jug here from when I forgot to put the drain plug in the last time I changed the oil. So the other thing we're going to need is a filter. In this case, I bought a Mobile one. This is actually a cartridge filter, so you have no canister in it. I try to avoid the orange box of death. Your results may vary. I used to use the orange can of death, and until it started leaking on me one day, like maybe a day and a half after I changed the oil, and I never went back. So definitely get yourself a good quality filter. I still change the oil very frequently on these, so I probably don't need the fancy filter, but it's cheap insurance and it's not that much money, all things considered. Tools you're going to need your suitable drain pan, which we have sitting right over there. We have our 15mm ratcheting wrench. That's for the drain plug. You're going to need a 32mm socket. They do make special sockets for these. I bought this a long time ago when my in-laws got a GMC Terrain, which has the same style of filter. So this socket will work, this socket will fit. They make a shorter one that's actually meant for this purpose. If you have the later 2.4 GDI ones, that is a must, because you need like 3 extensions sticking out of that dang thing to try and get that out. So this thing is a must, an extension for sure, because this thing's going to stick, up out of here quite a ways. GM buried this thing way on down in there. You probably can't see it. You could just probably make out the hex. I'll grab the light when we get started here. But that's how you take the filter off. Okay, so first things first, we're going to drain the engine oil. Now, one thing to be aware of is these Ecotecs have an aluminum oil pan, kind of like a Honda. So do not strip this. I've actually already loosened this plug. These don't actually have a crush washer on them. General Motors thought that one out and built in a little rubber seal into that. I've just been driving this car reasonably hard, so this thing's going to come out here smoking hot. I will be willing to bet. Yep. Okay. There she be. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to let this thing drain. We want to make sure that our pan is directly underneath, so when this thing's down to a dribble, that we won't have to worry about any of the oil spilling all over the floor. And the reason being is because when we take our filter out, it's going to drain down into the pan and out the drain plug. So do not put the So do not put the drain plug back in until we've done changing the filter. Okay, so the filter location, so we're looking at the front of the motor right here. There's our oil dipstick. And we kind of come down here by the throttle body, kind of between these two plastic bits here, the power steering reservoir and this cover for the throttle, and you will see right there, that thing with the hex on it, that is our filter covering. Okay, so now, put in our 32mm socket, our extension, which you may want a longer one. I have a bunch, I just have to actually grab them. I think I'm going to need 2 hands for this. Okay, so the trick is once you got this thing loose enough to get out by hand, you want to take your massive oversized socket out of there and you just spin this guy off. Now, unlike the Hyundai and Kia ones, these actually stay down in the bore. For the Hyundai and Kia ones, they actually stay stuck to the cap. I think so do the Ford ones, but the Ford ones actually come built in with the cap, at least from the standpoint of an OEM filter. I know the cheaper ones, you take it out of the cap. So these are a little messy. Unfortunately, I don't have gloves right now because of COVID, gloves are in short supply. So you see our filter's a little twisted here. And they all do that. I have no idea why. I thought it was just from use because the terrain was kind of my only point of reference with these. I'm just letting it drip off. As we can see, it's still it's kind of reddish brown, which is good. That means that the oil is not too bad. I've seen these with the GM oil life monitor when people let them run forever, like 10, 12,000, 15,000 kilometers between oil changes, and these things are jet black and basically disintegrating. So don't let it get to that point. I don't trust those maintenance minders. I stick with a good old 5,000 kilometers, 3,000 miles. The Kia 6,000 kilometers because that's what the manual recommends for severe duty, but potato, it works. Okay, so what I've done is I've dabbed a little oil on this tip here. That goes down, so when you pull it out, this basically plugs off the hole that allows this to drain back into the pan. That's so that your filter housing doesn't drain all the way down every time you shut the engine off, and then when you start it again, it's got to pump it back up, which takes longer to build oil pressure, which obviously isn't good for the internal engine pieces. So I just kind of push it down in there, and you'll feel it pop into place. This isn't overly complicated. I might want to move this loom, actually. We've got to be careful about things surrounding this because we don't want any gunk in the filter, obviously. So there we go. Now the next step is we're just going to pry this O-ring off where my thumb is, and we're going to put on our new one right here, this orange colored one that came with the kit. That's fairly simple. Okay, so we have our new O-ring. I've covered it with some oil. I did the same with the other one. So what we do is we just kind of set it in place. These are a little tricky. And these thread in real easy. If it doesn't, then they're not quite on right. I try to thread it on by hand as far as I can. But the amount of times it's been spinning, it's definitely not stuck on anything. And we take our humongo socket. And you'll feel when this is caught on something. This one definitely is not. So with this thing, once you hit the point where it stops, stop. Don't torque this on there. Don't wrench it down. It only needs to be snug because I've seen these things get stuck and it is an absolute nightmare to get these off. So as you can see when we look at it, our gap is even all the way around. It's all the way down. That's the way it should be. So now I'm not going to forget this time, like I did the first time I changed the oil in this car, to put the drain plug back in. So let's put the drain plug in before we go ahead and fill it back up again. Okay, so just going to put our drain plug back in. We just got to have a little bit of glare from my head. Yes, I did actually decide to shave it right off. My wife dared me to, and she thought it was a joke, and then when she came into the bathroom and saw I had my head lathered in shaving cream and had the razor out, she kind of got the shock of her life. And that's it. That's all you got to tighten them to. Just a little snug. We don't need to go overkill because it will strip these threads and you'll be sitting there cursing at it. These GM plugs have a lot of threads in them too, unlike the Honda ones, so the chances that you're going to actually rethread that hole and put a longer bolt in or something like that, like the Eric the Car Guy video that I had watched on how to fix a stripped Honda plug, you're probably not likely to do that in this case. So do be careful and do not over tighten that. Alright, so before we start this engine, we need to locate the little lamp light there. So that indicates that the engine has no oil pressure, which obviously we don't because the engine's not running. Looks like we got oil pressure. Okay, I'm going to go take this thing down off the ramps and we'll check the oil level. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to look down in here where your filter is and make sure she's not spewing any engine oil, which in our case looks good. So we're going to pull out our engine oil dipstick. These cable ones, they're a lot more robust than the sheet metal ones. And there is pretty much nothing on the dipstick. So we're going to have to add another quart of engine oil by the look of it. Well, I hope you enjoyed following along on our oil change on our 2005 Pontiac Sunfire. Hopefully you won't be seeing too many videos of this car, because if you do, then that means I probably bought a lemon, but she's been pretty darn solid. We bought it in July, and it has been, so this is the very beginning of December, and it has been absolutely rock solid. It is a 15-year-old car. We're not going to get away from the fact that just general bits are worn out on it. Wheel bearing, brakes, stuff like that, that's normal. I believe that this car had the original tires on it. Day 4 of owning this car, and there's a big screw through the side of the tire, and that was it. So we got new tires much sooner than we wanted to, but since we sold the Mazda the day before, we had a good chunk of change, well, not a huge chunk of change, but we had a chunk of change from selling the car, which actually covered the cost of the tires, plus a couple of date nights, so that's definitely positive. Anyways, I've blabbered enough, so you can follow me Facebook at facebook.com/6speeddakota, Twitter at 6speeddakota, Instagram 6speeddakota, and right here on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed this video.